In this video, we're going to show you step by step how to build your own jig to recess metal table legs. And it's going to look like this. All right, welcome to the den. My name is Troy, and today we're building this recess jig. So we'll try and go step by step without missing anything. However, we don't want to bog it down neither, right? Because this is kind of it's a tutorial video. So if you're gonna recess metal table legs into the underside of a coffee table, sofa table, a desk, anything like that, you're gonna want this jig because it's fast, reliable, and you can repeat the process. Okay, it's a simple jig. There's just a few things that you need to make the jig and a few points that you really got to focus on. Aside from that, it's pretty much 1, 2, 3 and you're done. Material, piece of 1/2 inch plywood, 14 inches by 14 inches. For stop blocks, measuring in at 16 inches long and 2 inches tall, 1.5 inches wide. These stop blocks are going to be 16 inches to begin with. That'll give you a little bit of room, but for now we're going to leave them long so you can do a little test cut. You have an extra 2 inches or so to play around with. Outside of the common shop tools such as tape measures and pencils and clamps, we are going to need a few tools to complete the build on this recess jig. We're going to use a router with a 1/2 inch spiral bit and a table saw with a dado blade. The dado blade is optional, but it sure makes things a lot nicer. A brad nailer, however, could substitute that with hand nailing it. The key ingredient when it's all finished, we're going to be using brass inserts, which are basically template guides. I'll try not to move too fast. We'll kind of slow it down. We'll just go step by step through this video because this jig is awesome and you need it. Feel free to rewatch the video or go back to the parts that you need a little more explanation on, and hopefully I gave you enough. And also for the tools that we used or supplies, we also have some links in the description if you want to go check them out. Something worthwhile mention is tightening the blade down. I know it's so easy to do to tighten it too tight. You know, it's spinning so fast, you're like, wow, I would never want that thing to come out and cut my hair, I guess, right? So you don't have to cinch this thing down that tight. Essentially, this thing's spinning to the right and you're tightening to the left. It's reverse threads. We've set our blade height to 1.5 inches, set our fence to just over 1/2 inch, almost 5/8 of an inch. Now we're ready to go. Right now the saw is turned off, so we can get close to the blade, set our feather board. The idea here when you're running through the table saw is always having 2 pressure points, one against the fence and one going through the table saw, okay? We've created our dado cut now. Let's just test it out on the 1/2 inch plywood. And we got a nice perfect fit. Okay, so this is important to just test it out. Make sure that your blade's set up. If it doesn't fit or you gotta force it, stop, adjust your blade, go ahead, run through, make sure that it's good. If you got her the first go, right on, and go ahead and run the second stop block through. We'll go ahead and switch the blade over now. Okay, we got our single blade in. Now what we want to do is we're going to want to cut this piece off, creating our jig. So we want to keep the blade within the dado itself. So we're going to take our feather board, we're going to set that again, the meaty part up against the fence. We have the fence set at 15/16, and we're just gonna go ahead and run this through. So just like that, we've got exactly what we need. All right, do that for both stop blocks. Hit that plywood with 120 grit just to clean everything up and make sure everything is nice and smooth. Okay, let's be real here. Thought about using a palm sander. I guess we'll never know. Make sure that everything snaps in together. Nice and tight. Okay, this little gap here, it's you'll see it's definitely worthwhile having. Check for square, double check for square. And by leaving that gap in there, you can check and make sure that everything is tight up against the plywood. Go ahead, mark your boards. Before we glue the stop blocks on, we're gonna wanna make sure that we measure our router from the tip of the blade to the edge of the base. And the router that I'm gonna be using is 2 5/8, okay? So that measurement's 2 5/8. This is important because not all routers are the same and you might not have the exact router that we have. So you're gonna have to compensate for the difference. So if you got something wider, you'll have to trim back a little bit of this J, or if it's smaller, then we're gonna have to add some here in the next step. Okay, so jot that number down, you're gonna need it. Okay, I'm assuming that we're good, so we're just gonna go ahead and glue and nail the stop blocks onto the plywood. We got one critical part finished. We got the bottom side here. That's where it's gonna slip onto the table. And it's at a perfect 9-degree angle. So we're gonna be bang on every time. Then next, for reference, I just continue that mark all the way down. Just so I know, where the edge of table line is, so I can make reference later. Hairpin legs, they kind of go out on an angle, so we want to make sure that angle doesn't go past the edge of the table, because if it does, then it's going to be a toe stubber, right? So right on, now we need a table leg. So we're going to take our table leg, and basically it's going to sit on there to the lines that we made. Something like that. Okay, these trim pieces, they're just under 1/4. So I'm gonna make my mark here. I'm gonna make my mark there. And I'm gonna continue that around over to this side. Another one there. Okay. When you're trying to line that bolt up exact with that hole, right? It's nice if you can move this just a little bit just to get her sunk in. Our next step is going to be taking that measurement that's still on our square, 2 5/8, and we're going to transfer some lines. We filled in these lines, and from here to here, everywhere, from here to here, from here to here, here, everything's equal. So 2 5/8. If your router changes, this is where you're gonna have to alter things, right? If you had to say it was a smaller base, like smaller, so there'll be a smaller gap, so you'll have to make it up. We're gonna take that cutoff piece from the stop block, cut it to length, and just tack it on. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side, just put the square down and 2 brad nails. With these measurements that we just did, we're gonna be really close. It might be just a touch on the outside. That line, that's because we used that cut off to measure it. That's fine. The router that I'm gonna be using has a 1/2 inch spiral bit on it. Works perfect for this project, and also when we go ahead and recess the metal legs into the table. Bring your home free. Last step here is to carve this out just like we did there. So we're using the same pieces. Put this one here, the one that was up there, put it down here, right on our lines. We'll go ahead and route that out. Okay, jig complete. Perfect, perfect. Now the only thing left to do is to give it a try. There's one important thing to mention, and that is if you were to go ahead and put that table leg in, you notice that'll be awfully sloppy, and that's way more room than we need. But this was done on purpose, and the reason for that is because of the brass threaded inserts. Okay, so if you notice, this one here is a 5/8, so we're gonna have to make up the difference of the brass bushing itself and the clearance. That little lip sits on there just like this, right? And then you can go all the way around using the hole as the actual template. The time spent building this jig will be rewarded in the future when you go to use it. Okay, we went ahead and made our test cut on a scrap piece of wood, and you'll notice that there's nice spacing all the way around. Everything locks in fairly good, and there's a little bit of wiggle room for when you go ahead and install the bolts into the threaded inserts. So that's it right there. Mission complete. Good job, guys.